Michelle, and welcome everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Amy Sherman will be talking to us about end-of-life options, advanced care planning during the age of COVID-19. This is a really crucial topic given the timeliness of our pandemic and the situation we have with that. Amy is the Midwest Regional Campaign Manager for Compassion and Choices. That's a national nonprofit organization that works to expand end-of-life options and empower people to take care of their own end-of-life journeys. She's leading a statewide coalition in Illinois in partnership with Final Options and the ACLU of Illinois, both in Illinois, and she oversees activities in several other Midwestern states. Over her career, she has led national and state policy initiatives and provided technical assistance to government, business, and institutions on a variety of issues, including adult learning and workforce development. Early in her career, Amy earned a law degree from Northwestern University School of Law and practiced in the area of employment law. She also served as Dean of Students at Northwestern. Prior to her law career, Amy managed emergency services at University of Illinois Hospital and the Emergency Services House Staff Program at Cook County Hospital. And it was these experiences that led her to develop her deep passion for patient-centered and compassionate approaches to healthcare. I think you're going to get a lot of useful information and you'll get directed to resources that you can use after today's program. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy now. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much, and thanks for this opportunity. I'm going to bring up my presentation if the Zoom spirits allow. Here we go. I really want to thank the Village. I love the organization. I love the model. And it means a lot to me to be able just to have this conversation with you. Please note, since we're, it's always hard on a Zoom, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat. My co-presenter, Mary Starr, who will be talking to you about how to get engaged if you're interested locally. She's going to be keeping an eye on the chat. Yes, Mary? Yes.
Oh, no, or I will be. Barbara will be.
Yeah. Barbara will be. Okay. Yeah, so in other words, I won't be, but I'll be able to hear, and we can always, if you have something urgent, and we'll also have a Q&A period. But I'd like to just kick off because we got a lot of ground to cover. So let me continue on. I don't know how many of you know about Compassionate Choices. Barbara did a good job of just describing what it is. I think what's important about us is we really believe that you, not the healthcare system, should be the ones who are deciding what your end-of-life care should be. What you want, what you don't want. And as a part of that, we really work with you to be able to talk with your family, talk with your providers, really the process of identifying what your end-of-life care wishes are. Because there's an assumption we all know this, but go through that with you and help you then document and maximize your chances of having those wishes honored. We also do a lot just generally in the end-of-life movement. And I think that's important for you to know. We have a whole legal department that works on advocacy, everything from pain treatment to medical aid in dying. We also have an end-of-life consultation service for those who are really making some very tough calls and that acute time. We have a policy team, and then we are working on the ground in advocacy to change laws and work on policy. So that's just to give you a little flavor. Today, we're going to really talk about the medical landscape at the end of life, making sure you really know what your options are, because there's quite a few. And then digging in on the tools and resources, and that'll include the COVID-19 toolkit, but I also want to mention dementia. I was interested in hearing that you're having a meeting about dementia, and also advanced directives. And then Mary's going to just talk briefly about what's happening in Illinois. So jumping in, I assume all of you would agree that this is more what we have in mind when we think about dying, what we would want, that we would consider this to be a good death, to be home, surrounded by loved ones, peaceful, doesn't look like a lot of suffering going on. But the reality is many of us die this way, where we're isolated, and that's particularly true with COVID-19, hooked up to machines in an acute care facility. And the question is, why is this imbalance between what we want and what the reality is? Is there this disconnect? And a part of this, I think, is about where we're at in terms of our medical industry. And I do want to say, I do not like to trash doctors. I have a lot of respect for doctors, particularly now it's very hard to practice. So I don't want to make this about individual doctors. It's a system issue to me. But I think this right here from Dr. Gawande, I don't know how many of you have read his book, Being Mortal, really says it, that, you know, we really have an issue that technology has advanced to a point where, I'm sorry, I can't even see my slide here. Let me move those. You know, modern scientific capability has profoundly altered the course of human life. We live longer and better than any time in history. But scientific advances has also turned the process of aging and dying into medical experiences to be managed by healthcare professionals. And we in the medical world have proven alarmingly unprepared for it. And this is what we see, that there is this issue with, yes, we're living longer, many ways we're living better, but when it comes to end of life, are we? You know, who gets to decide at what point does the quality of life and the quantity of days becomes imbalanced? And I think only the person who has the condition, who's going through this, should make that decision. That's a really big part of what we feel at Compassion and Choices. No one understands what is intolerable suffering except the person who's experiencing it. And while we know most people would like to die at home surrounded by loved ones, you'll find only 20% are doing that now. Right now, based on this Stanford Medicine study, 60% of Americans are dying in acute care hospitals, 20% in nursing homes. We're also seeing that, you know, about a third are receiving non-beneficial treatments and tests that have no hope of improving health. And then they're impacting negatively quality of life. So there's clearly a disconnect going on. And while this quote, I happen to love Dr. King like everybody else, but this quote really resonates for me. I know that Martin Luther King said this, really talking about civil rights, but I think it applies here, which is, you know, I came to the conclusion that there's an existential moment in your life where you must speak for yourself. Nobody else can speak for you. And that's a big part of what we need to think about in terms of documenting our wishes. So let's talk about the various options. By the way, this is not wine, this is water. Just want to make sure people know that. It's very good. So let's go through options at end of life. Obviously, you can pursue treatment. That is everyone's right. And I think that's important because you'll hear a lot about you know, the various ways to stop treatment and document that wish, but it's always an option. Obviously, you can refuse treatment. Interestingly enough, a lot of people find it's very hard to say no to doctors. Our culture is one of deference to doctors, and often, you know, unless you've given a strong notice to family that this is how you feel, the default position is to follow what a doctor says. So if a doctor's recommending certain cares, certain interventions, that's typically how it goes. So it's important that we know we can refuse treatment. We can also discontinue treatment that we're already having. I'll give you an example. My mom had Alzheimer's, and I went through the journey, a 10-year journey with my mom on overseeing her care and being with her. There was a certain point where I was like, why does she have a pacemaker? It makes no sense at this stage. She does not have good quality of life. Why is she on all these statins, et cetera? Discontinuing those treatments made sense, just as having them when they were first prescribed made sense. So that's important. I think we underuse that option. Palliative care and hospice care, I think people sometimes get them confused, but palliative care can be used while you're having curative treatment. It's meant to alleviate any kind of pain. It's comfort care. And I think, often underuse it. And in fact, One of the things I've learned from my experience is that, whenever I have a condition, I want a palliative care specialist if I'm having any kind of suffering. Hospice is under the umbrella of palliative care. Hospice is though they're for people who have had a prognosis that they have 6 months or less to live. What I think is really a good part of that model is that it's an interdisciplinary model. So it's not just the doctor, the clinician, the nurse, et cetera, but it's also a wide array of therapists, social workers, and others who work with the family. They look at the person who's got the illness as almost a part of a bigger ecosystem that needs to be addressed. And that also includes spiritual leaders, I should mention that. And I think that model, it seems so obvious to us now, but that was considered fairly revolutionary even 10, 15 years ago. Voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, I'm hearing more and more about this option. And in Illinois, where we don't have medical aid in dying, which I'll mention in a minute, this is an option that I think people really look at seriously. And the idea is to stop eating and drinking and pass away. I will say with VSED, as we call it, it usually takes a couple weeks. When someone is at close to end of life, it's not unusual for them to already lose the desire to eat or drink. So it's not always as traumatic as one might think to do this. It's a choice that somebody can make. I've known people who have, for example, ALS or have Parkinson's, et cetera, who have used this as an option. So it is legal. And I think, it's something one can do. And it's very important that they make sure that their wishes are known, that they're in a facility that would honor that, et cetera. Continuous deep sedation, which is really also called palliative sedation, is where you're kept either unconscious or semi-conscious, and this is to alleviate suffering at end of life. And then finally, medical aid in dying. And this talk is not about medical aid in dying, but I did keep a few slides in because I want to make sure you know what it is. It's something where there is a lot of movement in Illinois, and if there's ever an interest in learning more, I'd be happy to come back and dig in on this. We are working with, as mentioned, ACLU of Illinois and Final Options Illinois on a statewide effort to get it authorized in Illinois. Right now, it's authorized in 9 states and in DC. And medical aid in dying allows a terminally ill adult to request and receive a prescription for medication that they can take, and it's their choice, to bring about a peaceful death. And to qualify, you have to be mentally capable to make that decision. You have to be able to self-ingest the medication. In other words, it can't be euthanasia where the doctor gives you a shot. That's not allowed. And this is because we wanted to show that it's voluntary. And you have to have a prognosis of 6 months or less. So there is a process. Typically, it's 2 doctors that have to confirm. So there's an attending and a consulting doctor. They have to confirm the terminal diagnosis, and it cannot be because of age or disability. They also have to confirm that there's no coercion, that this is voluntary. And in fact, coercion is subject to criminal prosecution. And I can tell you in the over 20 years that it's been available in Oregon and since, there have been no cases of fraud or abuse or coercion that has been substantiated. Finally, I just want you to know we've had 10 jurisdictions, and in 2019 we had 2 states which passed legislation for medical aid in dying, and it's been a combination of legislation, referendums, and actually a court case. And I have to be honest, so it's 20% of adults in the U.S. that live in a state where there is authorization for medical aid in dying. I do want to say to you, even after it's passed, there's also lots of work on defending legislation. We get a lot of good information about medical aid in dying, and in 2019, we got an annual report from Oregon, which showed that most people who use medical aid in dying are older. The primary cause has been cancer, although there are neurological conditions such as ALS, which are common causes, related diagnoses. Nearly all were on hospice, which meant they were in a structured setting. and had people who were there with them through this process. And also they died at home. So over 90% died at home. It is a small practice. It's not everybody's using this. It's completely voluntary. There were 12 prescribing physicians in Oregon in 2019 who wrote 290 prescriptions. That shows you the size that we're talking about. So onward and upward. Let's move away. Unless anybody has any questions about medical aid in dying, I'm going to move away from that. Okay, so let's talk about ACP, which is Advanced Care Planning. And I think with all the tragedy that's come from the pandemic, one of the things that has been positive is that we really are starting to talk more about death and recognizing that we're all mortal. And what's been interesting is providers are asking, really pleading, and I've seen more than one article about this, that people get their affairs in order and get their advanced directives done. They are relying on that because now, particularly with the disconnect happening in terms of not having family there present, they really need to know what people's wishes are. So they're encouraging people to fill out advanced directives. So we're at the time for a poll, and crossing my fingers that we can launch this poll. And hopefully we'll all
Okay, Amy, I think that all 3 questions might come up at the same time.
That's okay.
Okay.
No biggie.
Okay. There we go.
So if you could all give a yes or no. Hopefully this will work. We're going to see.
Yep, we've got 5 responses, 6.
No one can see what your responses are?
No, I can just see a number, right? Got a few more coming in.
Great.
Oh, it looks like it'll end automatically.
Oh, okay.
Seconds.
That's new.
No, I was wrong. I was looking at it backwards. It's just counting how long it's
Okay.
been open.
Well,
Okay, so we have 77% have voted. So I'll go ahead and end the poll.
Okay, I just need the results and we're good.
There you go.
So we see here, we have a good number compared to what you see generally. It's usually less than half, 64% who have advanced directives, but 36% who don't. So I hope we can work with you on that. I think where we really see a lot of need is on the dementia addendum and on the COVID-19 addendum, that most of us don't have specific addendums to our advanced directives on this. And that's why we're here today. So we're going to talk about getting going on that. Let's get rid of that. And
Okay, I'll close that.
thank you. Thanks for your help.
Sure.
So the big first thing I'm going to say is I hope you give the time to this process that it deserves, because it's an important thing. And one of the things I would recommend is going to the Compassionate Choices website. It is just rich with resource, and going to our Plan Your Care Resource Center. And you can see if you go to our general main page, just hit the Plan Your Care at the top, second one to the right, and it will take you to this resource center. And the first thing in it is your end of life decisions guide toolkit. We're going to talk a lot about that, but you'll see materials in here for COVID-19, our toolkit, dementia, it is incredibly rich resource. So I just, if you take anything from this, I hope you will take a good look around this website. The end of life decisions guide. This is something that you can get, you can order, or you can download through our website. I love this. I have used it to plan my own advanced planning. I updated, I felt like, I should walk the walk. So I updated all of my advanced directives and added the addendums. And I use this toolkit. And what it's really about is it's helping you figure out, first of all, what your wishes are, and then helping you step by step in terms of how to document them in an effective way. So I highly recommend this. And what I love about it is it has this planning checklist. And I'm a woman who needs a checklist. This is what helps me get through life. So if you like checklists, this is great. And it helps you step by step, like the values worksheet, which will work with you on figure out what's important to you. For example, is it important to me to have mobility? Is it important to me to be able to talk? All the various pieces in here of what are the general categories of things that are important to me? So I find that this values worksheet is the first step. I also really love, and let me get to it, that we have some addendums in here. For example, we have a dementia provision in here. We'll talk about an interactive toolkit that you can use. We have information about PULSE, which is a physician order for life-sustaining therapies. There's also a wonderful letter in here to medical providers. There's a lot in here in the planning checklist. But let's go to, just as an example, the My Particular Therapies. This is a wonderful resource in the guide. And what it does is help you decide and give direction, particularly for your power of attorney for healthcare, for your representative, on what therapies you'd really want at the end. What would I really want for life-sustaining treatments? And it talks about things like antibiotics, dialysis, electroshock, feeding tubes, steroid treatments, all sorts of things. And what I really like about it as it lists these things is it's not only just a yes or no, it also has an option for, yes, I'm fine with a trial period to see if it works, but I don't want to just have it continuously. So I think this is a very helpful thing for your family to see and for you to think about as you're starting to do your plans. The advanced directive is incredibly important, critical part of your planning. If you haven't done it yet, and I know some of you are looking, you can find your documents for advanced directives both on our website. It will take you to the next. You can see there's two links here. One is for our website. One is to the Illinois Department of Health. It actually has all the listing, all the different forms that you could use in advanced directives. So I highly recommend checking that out as a part of the starting point. I think what's the most important one is making sure you have your power of attorney ready, so you have a representative who can speak for you when you can't speak. And with that, I think you want to identify in advance what kind of care that you'd want if you became incapacitated. You also want to identify that person who's going to be your power of attorney, and you want to make sure it's not just a primary person, but you also have in sequence an alternate. I think that's very important, because maybe that primary, maybe they're not capable, or they don't want to, or they're not available to in that moment to serve as your representative. And in most states, you don't need a lawyer or a notary. In Illinois, you need 2 witnesses, and you need those people to also accept, you sign it in front of the 2 witnesses, and you also need those representatives that you have designated to sign and accept their appointments. I don't know why, but this is not moving. Well, now it's moving. Okay. My apologies. I'm having just a little bit of an issue. Don't know why. Okay. There we go. So who should make decisions for you? I think it's incredibly important that you make sure it's somebody who you really trust. Remember, you're literally putting not only your life, but your death in their hands. So it's somebody who you feel you can count on, somebody who I think you don't typically, it doesn't have to be a family member, but you do want someone who's available. It doesn't have to be someone who's nearby, but you want someone who can hop on a flight if they need to, answer the phone if they need to, they can get there quickly. It cannot be a healthcare provider. That's important. Or anyone under 18. It must be an adult. What I think is great is you can also specify who you do not want to make decisions on your behalf. And if you're in a family where there's someone who you know might create conflict for you, who has some strong beliefs that are contrary, please, this is your chance to let them know they're not going to be the ones who are speaking for you. Now, I think when there's some questions you can ask yourself when you're thinking about who this person should be. And I'm going to suggest, even those of you who have a power of attorney right now, who have a representative, think about these questions against that person now, because you can always change it. And it's important to update. Relationships change over time. So, will they act on your wishes? Can they separate their own feelings? Is this too much of a burden for them? And I think that's really important to look at. And that's why I said it doesn't have to be family. Can they get to you? Do they know you? Do you trust them with this big issue? And also, do you feel comfortable talking to them about sensitive issues around healthcare? Would you be able to, because it's not just like, here's this piece of paper, now go. There's a lot of conversation that should happen afterwards. Are they available for the long term? Can they handle conflicting opinions with your family, your friends, your medical team, and still really be the advocate that you want them to be? And there may be, and I hear many stories about this, of doctors or institutions who just are not listening. And they need to be able to speak up for you and make sure that your voice is not only heard, but that they adhere to your wishes. So this is an important job. Now, after you've completed your advance directive, you want to make sure to share this with everybody. When I just updated mine, I sent it to like 20 people in my family or friends. And I just said, these are my wishes, please follow them. Another thing, by the way, you can do is a little videotape to say, please listen to blah, 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 so that your family hears your voice in advance saying these are, and maybe some general discussion about your wishes. You're not going to be able to cover everything in your advance directive. And that's why it's important, to make sure that your proxy has the authority and the room to make some decisions at the time, because they're going to have to factor in all the variables. Very important that you distribute these copies of your advance directive, but you also keep them in an accessible, safe place. It's the first file folder in my file drawer. So I think it's very important. I have one in my glove compartment. I gave it to my doctor. I have it in my hospital records department. I'm not saying it's even going to get to wherever the right people, but the more I spread it, the more I raise the percentage of odds that they'll have it. And then it's really important to, look at your goals for care throughout your life and update your advance directive regularly. When I do it every year, I look at my financial picture, I look at the portfolio and all that, and retirement. And that's when I look at this and I say, okay, is this still how I feel? Is this still what I want? Are these still the right people? And I find that by doing that, then I can check it off my list and feel confident of it. So having that, and also if you have changes, let's say you have a divorce or you move or your health condition has changed, all of those really, I think, signal a time to take a look, okay, at your advance directive. I want to also mention POST. I don't know how many of you know what POST is. It's the physician order for life-sustaining treatment. And that's the big thing, is it's a physician's order. And it looks at things like, whether you want to have resuscitation, you want CPR, what level of medical interventions you want, do you want a feeding tool, do you want ventilation, et cetera. And we recommend this only when you have a serious illness, because it will be adhered to, and you want to make sure that it's not overly broad when you're healthier, you might want to actually have that therapy. So I recommend these. I think they're good. They are legal in Illinois. They are available. They're not available in every state. They don't have to be fuchsia. I just happen to like the fuchsia, but I do think having them in a place where people see it and that it's accessible is important. Let me give you an example of why it's important. Let's say you're seriously ill and you're with your partner at home and you have some sort of seizure or attack, and even though you've said to your partner, I do not want to go into the ICU, I want to go, it's pretty natural that they're going to start to go, I don't know what I should do. I think I'll call 911 and let them figure this out. So all of a sudden the paramedics are there. They are going to try to resuscitate you because that's, unless they have something to the contrary, they're going to do that. And so having the pulse right there available for them to see, and they have a physician order, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable not doing that. So I do really think it's very important. And then I want to also talk to you a little bit about dementia COVID. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions so far about anything I've discussed or things that maybe you'd want me to cover?
So Amy, there was one question in chat, and Kathy Williams commented that they're difficult decisions to make about, especially for folks that don't have a medical background, about choices for end-of-life care. For example, everyone wanted a ventilator at the beginning of COVID, and as more information was discovered, most did not want a ventilator, and that medical care evolved. So any advice or comments you want to make on that?
I could not agree more. And just having undergone the process myself, we are not experts in these areas. And I think that's another thing is, talk to your doctors too. Don't think you have to do this totally alone. There also are, as I said, there are actually a lot of resources on CNC's webpage that give you some considerations. For example, we actually have for COVID-19, and understanding your options that talks about some of the various treatments and things that you might want to know about. So getting some of those outside options. This is not a one-day process. This really takes time because not only is it kind of getting to know what you care about, your values and priorities, but it's also making sure you have a better sense of the bigger picture. I think there's a lot out there. I will tell you for myself, and I do at the end have a couple resources, not a lot, but there's one, I think from Harvard about various therapies for COVID, et cetera. We'll get to that. But I actually did a little research before I made a decision, and I talked to my doctor in areas where I did not know enough. And I think it was worth the time because I feel more confident about the decisions I made because of that. And let's face it, that's why a lot of people don't get this done because it does take work. But when you do it once well, it's not so difficult to update at that point. COVID, it obviously took us all by surprise. But I think now what the good thing is there's a lot more information and knowledge about it than when we first started, for things like ventilation, for example. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I understand it. That's why I do think, you want to have providers who will have a conversation with you. And by the way, you can schedule an end-of-life conversation, consultation with your doctor. And if you're on Medicare, it should be covered. So you do want to, if you're going to talk to your doctor about any of these things, make sure you schedule some so that you're not in your follow-up on something else and you're going to try to throw this in, schedule some time for it. So I don't know, anything else on that? Terry, can't hear you. I thought somebody was trying to talk, but.
I am. I once worked with a family when I was at Fourth Presbyterian Church, and she had two daughters and she was doing her end of life decision. And she said she was closer with one daughter than the other, but the one whom she wasn't as close with was very clear and would follow instructions, as opposed to the one she was closer with, who she was fearful would get too emotional and not do what she wanted done. So those kinds of things are decision-making points.
I completely agree. And I mentioned, that you want somebody who's going to be objective, and sometimes the family's not that. I think, thank you for sharing that. Or it'll be too much of a burden for them. I think what's important is that you then talk to them and explain why you decided the other person, and make sure that they're, you have some peace, because you don't want conflict between the two siblings. Or whoever you make the decision with. I mean, I also think for a lot of people, it's a relief not to be the one who, it's a big responsibility. So I agree with you, and I think that person was very wise to do that. I think that for many people, they may not pick family members for that reason. So thank you for sharing that comment. Is there anything else before I go on to dementia? Because I'm kind of ready to move into that.
Amy, a very quick question.
Sure.
This is Gary. Just to be sure that I understand this, I have a primary care physician in my family. And I often anticipated asking her to be my representative. But are you saying that I cannot do that?
My understanding is you can't have the healthcare practitioner. And I also would say to you, that do you want to put that person in that position? I'd have to check. I don't know if it has to be your doctor. My sense would be that it would still apply. It can't be a healthcare. But if you want me to check that, I can. I personally think that's putting them in a tough spot because they have it's sort of like, don't treat yourself. I just sort of feel the same way about family. They're going to have to make healthcare decisions about you. And it might put them in a very difficult position. That's just my 2 cents for you to think about. And if you want, I can confirm that they're not allowed to. That would be,
That would be nice.
yeah, I'll follow up on it, unless somebody else knows for a fact.
I would like to have that confirmed
Okay.
because the person I've chosen is my nephew, who is an ENT, ear, nose, and throat specialist.
Okay,
He lives in South Carolina.
okay, is he still,
I've been to my doctor since I've been hospitalized.
is he still practicing, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, I will confirm it because it's important that you know. So I will confirm it, and I promise to get back to you this week, okay, with the answer to that.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to. So let's go to dementia now, if that's okay. Dementia is a collective term used to describe various symptoms of cognitive decline which result in loss of mental capacity. It's a symptom of several underlying diseases and brain disorders. So in other words, it's almost like an umbrella term on symptoms. And when you get down to it, it's not just one disease. It's really talking about impaired function, impairment in memory, communication, personality, and judgment. It's also called often a major neurocognitive disorder. I'm sure we all know Alzheimer's is the most common cause. It's anywhere from 60 to 80%. But there are as many as 50 other causes for dementia. Symptoms of dementia may improve with treatment, but there are many that are not curable. And quite frankly, even symptoms improvement is limited in many cases. Now, if you look at incidence and prevalence, you're going to see where, at least from a WHO report from 2017, there was about 50 million worldwide cases. That is going to go up exponentially, and we're getting annually 10 million new cases, okay, each year. So by the time we're at 2050, we're going to be at 152 million, at 2030, 82 million. So there's tremendous growth. And in Illinois, we have 5.7 million in 2017. We expect 13.8 million by 2050. It's a lot of people. And I think the fact, if you look at sort of how it progresses, so about 5 to 8% of adults over age 65 have some form of dementia. But that doubles every 5 years after 65. And by the time you're in your 80s, 50% has some measurable form of dementia. So it is something where, we all are impacted by this. I'm sure if I said this, you'd all agree. We know somebody who's dealt with dementia. And the good thing, though, is the rates are decreasing. The numbers are increasing because, this is exponential, but the actual rates are decreasing. And that's because of improved cardiovascular care and better treatment, early detection, et cetera, healthier lifestyles ultimately. And this is something from an article from Harvard School of Public Health This Dr. Chan has been doing research on this. And so it's interesting, we're going to be dealing with a lot more numbers, but we are actually addressing some of this as we continue to improve in our health treatment and lifestyle. The thing I wanted to show you today, and if you don't mind, I think I'm just going to open it up, is our values and priorities tool, because I think you'll find it very helpful. There's also a tool called a diagnosis decoder that I want to share with you, but let's start with this. I really like this. It's meant to ultimately give you an addendum for dementia. So let's see if I can get this to open. I have to get out of here actually to do it, it looks like. Let's see. Oop. That is not it. Okay. So let's start this. So either you say, I've been diagnosed with dementia, I have not been diagnosed with dementia, whichever one it is. Let's say not for now. I'm just going to give you some examples here. And what this does is it looks at various markers in dementia, level in terms of the progression of the disease, and then asks what level of care you would want in those scenarios. And here's one: I've forgotten everything about my past, but still recognize those closest to me. So while I want to live as long as possible, I want no life-saving treatments, I want to be kept comfortable and stop or avoid any treatments that will prevent me from dying from other diseases. I want to be kept comfortable, but stop all treatments and withhold food and water. And then this doesn't apply to me. So let's just say, I don't want any life-saving treatments. And then I'm able to live according to my spiritual beliefs, food preferences, meditating, prayer, attending, and then it's the same set of questions. Okay, so we'll go put that here. I no longer recognize my loved ones, but I still smile and seem happy in my old world. I'll just do this one. I'm just kind of picking anything. And then I hit next. And you can see there's the progression. Now I no longer recognize my loved ones, but I don't seem upset. I'm doing, I don't seem unhappy. What are my choices? I'll just pick this again. I'm suffering from anxiety. Does somebody, there's some kind of, are we okay? Okay, it's better now. For some reason I was getting feedback. And are you not able to control it with medicine? You're not able to control it and I'm anxious. Well, then I'm starting to say, okay, I'd like to go a little farther in my things. So I'm going to say, keep me comfortable, but stop or avoid any treatments that are preventing me from dying from other diseases. So this continues on. I'm not going to do all of them. I think I'll just do not apply so we can get to the finish line here. But you can see it going up. I'm angry and violent, but I can be controlled with meds. I'm angry and violent, but it can't be controlled with meds. I can't communicate with my loved ones through words, which is very typical in progression, particularly with Alzheimer's.
Amy, let me ask you this one question. Is Jackie Curley asked if you don't, but this was an earlier question, but
Yeah.
I think it applies to some of the ones you've gone through. If you don't recognize your family, or there's a question that you answer, I can't do this. How do you fill the form out? I mean,
you have to do this before. You have to do this when you get the diagnosis or even before you get the diagnosis. There's usually some period that you're in mild cognitive impairment, but you're still capable of making these decisions. That's why we're trying to get this to people now.
So technically, if someone wasn't wasn't able to recognize their family, they really should not be filling out this form.
It's really too late for them to do that. Yeah, I mean, they're
Jackie,
too
hope that answered your
cognitively
question.
impaired. Yeah, at that point. It's the same kind of standards that you would have if you were looking at an advanced directive. So no longer bathe. I'm just doing does not apply, but I just want you to see the kinds of questions, no longer toilet. So it's about some of the lifestyle pieces, you know, would I want to continue on or not? And I don't know if you guys want me to go through this whole thing. I just want you to know what it does is it prints out at this point, it'll print out a summary of everything you've answered. I'm going to stop here. Everything you've answered. And then it actually asks you for combinations of markers. There may be some where I'm okay if I just can't speak, but if I can't speak and I can't toilet myself, then I want to go to a different level of care than I had before. I want to go to, you know, maybe I'm ready for VSED. You know, so in other words, it gives you a chance to combine them also, which I think is great. And you can add also additional markers of your own. And ultimately what this does is it produces a addendum for you that you can actually sign and create and then add to your advanced directive. So that's what I wanted to share with you. The other thing that I was hoping to share, if I can get the Zoom thing to move out of the way. There we go. This is not it. This is not it. I'm not finding it all of a sudden. Sorry. Here we go. There's also a decoder that we have. So let's say, you know, you've got a loved one and you're going to go to the doctor for the first time for a consultation, or it's a follow-up. This tool is called the Dementia Decoder. Will help you to decide, okay, what questions should I be asking them? I don't know about you, but I know when I get a really scary diagnosis, my brain will shut down. I just don't think even if I was kind of prepared, I just wouldn't be hearing the same way, et cetera. And I think that's true for loved ones too. So this is a way to really help you develop a list. So you can say, you know, I don't have dementia, I do, I'm a caregiver, whatever your thing is, and it will start to ask you, so, okay, what is it that you really want to know? So let's say I just wanted to know about making sure my plans are carried out, okay? Or I could add my own concern. It will generate a list of all the possible questions that we have developed with a panel of experts that you can then create a master list of here are my questions, and it will print them out for you. You can select the ones you want. For example, what steps do I take to choose a person to carry out my wishes if I lose mental ability to make my own healthcare decisions? How do I make my choice of this person clear to anyone? Will you specifically add my advanced directive addendum for dementia to my medical records? So these are the kinds of questions that we have in here. So, you know, are there local organizations that may be able to provide me with additional resources, et cetera? I think this is very helpful because I know myself, I would not remember all the questions even if I thought them ahead. I wouldn't identify them all. So that's another tool you can use. I just wanted to share that with you. Let us now go back to this. Now let's talk a little bit about COVID. You know, several studies have shown that it's interesting that people with dementia have a higher risk of developing severe COVID. And there is some early research saying that this could be like some kind of underlying genetic change. And it's not just an issue of exposure. So it's interesting to see that there's some potential tie there. And I think it's important with COVID to know what resources you have. So we have on our website, first of all, Understanding Your Options, which really talks about what we know about the different options for caring for COVID. And I think is a very helpful starting place as you're thinking about what are my decisions for an addendum. We also have a section around telehealth. One of our concerns at Compassionate Choices is we really want telehealth to be more available so that when people who are quite sick don't have to go to the hospital if there's care that they could be getting from home, or and I think it's really improved. I think you'd all agree we have much more access to telehealth than we did at the beginning of the pandemic, which I hope will continue after the pandemic, because I think it's been really good. Tell you, for people at end of life, they should not have to go places unnecessarily that would expose them to a lot of germs and problems. So, and then the advanced care planning, we have a whole section on advanced care planning when you have COVID and its considerations around that. And then we have the addendum, which is actually for you to be able to fill out and give very specific answers to, okay, here are questions being posed. This is how I want this to be handled. And so it's giving really good advice to your power of attorney and to the doctors and the providers. And then finally, we have a section called Dying in the Age of the Pandemic, which is really addressed to those who do have terminal illnesses and how do you navigate at a time when we're in the middle of a pandemic. And you can find these resources here. Let me go down right here. So let's see if we can take a look at the advanced care planning. This talks about the decision guide, what you need to know about COVID-19, and really the process of, you know, what you should be telling your loved ones now instead of waiting until you're sick. And then what steps you need to create a plan. So I think this is very useful to look at. And I think, you know, looking at Pulse, looking at, you know, do you want to print, video record and distribute your wishes? I really believe in that. I'm a big believer in that. But these are some of the things that you can look at. And then moving actually to the addendum itself. This is just a very simple way to document your preferences in the case of COVID. And so it asks if your oxygen levels are dropping, do you want to go to a hospital? Do you want to try to get non-invasive respiratory care at home? If you're not able to get the non-invasive respiratory care at home, do you want to go to the hospital? It goes on and on here about, you know, when would you want to go to the hospital, under what circumstances? And then if you would like to be ventilated, are there any guidelines on how long you want to stay on a ventilator? I think that one's a really important one. Let's see here. Do you want to stay on the ventilator if you're going to need tubes to feed you to keep you alive? Because that's typically the scenario. So there's quite a few questions in here. I think that we also talks about if you have to go on dialysis, do you want to continue? It really, I think, is a great specific way to plan around COVID. And again, you may not know the answers of this. That means that you want to talk to your doctor, you want to do some research and look at this. But I think these are the kinds of questions that your healthcare representative, your proxy, is going to have to be able to address if you go in. And you can't be doing this when you're, you know, in the car on the way to the hospital. That is, you know, that's not going to be a useful conversation. So this is something I highly recommend you take a look at. And I hope you, if you don't have this, you have something. Hold on here. And then I'm going to get past these. This is a slide I just put together because I was saying, okay, how can I tell people to make all these decisions and not have at least a starting place of a couple articles they could look at? So here are some links to Harvard Health Publishing around treatments. It's, you know, it's fairly recent, it's from November. There's one here around intubation and mechanical ventilation. And I found that one useful as somebody who's doesn't have the medical background. And then I also included the max vaccination plan from the Department of Health. I don't know how many of you have been vaccinated. I'd be curious to see how many raise your hands if you've had your first vaccination. How many second? Okay, it's not, you know, you still have, there's people still looking. So I think having that research up to date and also having this information around vaccines is very important. I'm going to turn this over. I know we're running out of time, but Mary, do you want to talk a little bit about just
Sure.
what we're doing?
Sure. Hi, I'm Mary Starr, and I happen to be the chairperson of the Chicago Action Team. We have a list of our Illinois action teams on the screen, and more are in process of evolving. But Compassionate Choices is very smart because it's really a grassroots movement. In order to authorize medical aid in dying in the 9 states and jurisdictions that were successful, there was grassroots groundswell support. The support comes from volunteers like me and like yourself, who believe that medical aid in dying should be a legitimate option that Illinois citizens can access. So what I'd like to do is have an open invitation. Anybody who would love to do a deeper dive into all the things that Amy has been talking about, including medical aid in dying and how to authorize it in our state, is to become involved in an action team. My action team, Chicago Action Team, actually meets today. Once a month, we meet for 1 hour. We discuss progress in reaching our legislators and expressing our opinions about this matter. We make suggestions about groups like Hyde Park Village, where we can present and interest our neighbors, our friends, our family members, educate them on the options for end of life, including the possibility for medical aid in dying in Illinois, where we currently don't have that option. So there are many ways to get involved, and we so appreciate any bit of help that we can obtain from anybody who's interested in this endeavor. And it is an endeavor, but we think we can get there. The other states, and there are many more states that are introducing legislation this year, and Illinois wants to be one of those. But we need the support of volunteers to make that happen. So that's my pitch. And yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Thank you so much. I do want to say we are doing a lot of education like this session, and it's on a wide range of topics. We're also starting to do more outreach in the African American and Latino communities, really focusing on some of the racial disparity at end of life care, which is real. So, there's a lot of different ways you can get involved, and it doesn't have to be like, big. It can, everybody does a little bit, a lot happens. So, but I want to just move along. Mary, thank you so much. And Mary is a great example of a wonderful volunteer, but I just want to make sure if there's any other things in the chat, I want to make sure I've addressed them, or if there's any other questions.
Nothing else in the chat right now.
Okay. All right. So I want to make sure to share resources with you. I have a list of resources with links that I'm going to give to Michelle, who will send those out with the recording. So you'll have ways to look up some of the things I talked about. I also just want to mention this Finish Strong book by Barbara Coombs Lee. She is our former president, and she's just amazing. She's an attorney, she's a nurse, she's a physician assistant. She helped really to draft the first medical aid in dying legislation. But this book, Finish Strong, Putting Your Priorities First at Life End, it's about so much more than medical aid in dying. It's really getting, and it gives you so much practical advice. There's a very good, strong chapter on dementia in it. So I highly recommend it. We're not making any big bucks off of this. That's not why we do this. We just really think that this is a great place and very practical, which is, to me, what this should be about, so that people can then take action. So highly recommend that. You can get that on Amazon. And then I like to end with this. If I can move this so I can see it. Hold on here. So I love peanuts. I don't know if anybody else loves, but I love peanuts. So there's Charlie saying, "One day we will die, Snoopy." And then Snoopy says, "Yes, but every other day we will live." And I think that's what is important when you think about this planning. I mean, you can get kind of down about it and depressed, but the point is to try to have the best quality every single day up to your death. And that's what that advanced planning is really about. So I don't look at it just as focusing on death. I really look at it as focusing on life. And I hope that you can take this information and just have the best life you can right now. And I know it's been tough. I don't know how many of you have lost people. I certainly have. But it just makes me feel like that life is so precious, and let's try to enjoy it. That's sort of my message with this, and I hope you found this useful. Here's my email address. I would write it down if you have a piece of paper and pen, and I'll make sure also that it's included in the follow-up. If you want to get involved, if you have questions that I didn't answer, feel free to contact me. This is what I live for, is to try to answer those questions and be a resource to people. So I think with that, I'm just going to say thank you so much for this opportunity. You seem like really good people. I'd like to be in your village if you don't mind. So,
Well, Amy, we want to thank you so much for all of this great information you've presented and for all the resources that you've left us so that people can follow up on this and work on this even after today's program. And Mary, thank you too for helping us to get this program together. We really appreciate this information that you've shared, and I'm sure folks will find it useful. With that, I believe Michelle and Terry were ready to conclude the program.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Amy
well,
and Mary.
you've been terrific to work with. All of the planners have been terrific, and thank you very much.
Thanks,
Great.
everybody.
I'll
Have a great
share the
afternoon.
recording and all the resources as well that you email me, Amy.
Super. Thanks.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Have a
everybody.
good afternoon.